Welcome, fellow freaks, geeks, and nostalgic peeps, to my channel, Slime and Slashers, where, yeah, we talk about everything from Nickelodeon slime to horror movie slashers, but plenty of stuff in between, including books. And today's video, it is another book-themed video. It is my April wrap-up video. And if you guys didn't hear, April was a big month for me. I was the host of Old School April along with many of my friends. Old School April is a readathon, watchathon, activity-a-thon, essentially a celebration of all things nostalgia. So I read a lot of nostalgia-heavy books, and I watched a lot of old school movies and shows, so stay right there. We'll go to the short intro when we get back. I'll talk about all of the books. Quack. Quack, quack, quack! Welcome back! I'm wearing my Mighty Ducks jersey. I can't even say Mighty Ducks. I'm wearing my Mighty Ducks jersey because it's nostalgic. I love the Mighty Ducks franchise, the movie franchise. I am not a Ducks hockey fan. There is a team, the Anaheim Ducks. I'm not a fan. I am a fan of the Bruins. But for the movie, yes. Anyway, I thought that'd be thematic. Got my Lisa Frank earrings on. Got my butterfly hair clips. You can't really see this one. Oh no! It's there though. It's there. Whew. Okay, so we're all set. We're all thematic. I made a Old School April journal, which is what I use to keep track of my reading throughout the entire flippin' month. It was such a good time. Alright, so let's get started. I got my computer recording right behind you, so you can see my original TBR and how things kind of changed and evolved after I actually started reading during that month. Okay, first up, I had to start off the month very thematically, and my first read was Slime Time, because, you know, my channel, Slime and Slashers. Slime in the title, slime on the cover, slime in my channel name. Come on, Slime and Slashers! I had to read this first. And this is really ridiculous. I had such a good time with this. I ended up giving it a 4-star because it was just outrageous and ridiculous.
Jeremy Wilson's mucus is taking over the town. It starts when Jeremy lets out a messy sneeze in the school cafeteria. Suddenly, the droplets trickle across the floor and stick together. And every time he sneezes, the green glob grows bigger and bigger and bigger. If Jeremy doesn't figure out how to stop the fast-growing goop, the whole town will drown in a tidal wave of slime.
Like I said, I had fun. It's not for everyone. Of course, it's a middle grade book. But I embraced it, I had fun with it, and it was one of the better middle grade books that I read in the month of April, and actually since April, honestly. So 4 stars, lots of fun, also lots of ridiculousness. Next up, I read Night Warriors. Now this was a host rec from Andrew from It Came From the Page, and specifically he was like, I think you'd like one of these crazy scenes near the end of the book where an eel might destroy a dude's you know, peen. Anyway, it was crazy. It was a crazy destruction scene, and this was a lot of fun. I think this is more fantasy-leaning than pure horror. Essentially, it's these group of people who come together, and they're dubbed by this magical guy as the Night Warriors, and what they have to do is protect everyone in their dreams. Essentially, they leave their bodies as they're dreaming and they can face evil. And they've got to try to solve this evil and face who's responsible for it, because there's these crazy eels popping up around town where there's been dead bodies. This is not going to be for everybody, but it was a really fun vintage read. I ended up giving it a 4-star rating, especially because of the crazy scene with the eel that I mentioned that Andrew said I should read it for. Otherwise, it might have been like a 3.5, but that crazy scene, I was like, this is really gory and really insane and intense. And because of that, I was like, okay, I'm gonna up it to a 4-star. Next up, I read a non-horror related middle grade book. We have The No Stars, number 2, The Puck Stops Here. And it's just a cute, short, quick little book about a little hockey team who are used to losing, but then they work together to do a little bit better. This was kindly given to me by one of my co-hosts, Cameron from Library Macabre. Thank you, Cameron. I really enjoyed it. I ended up giving it a 3-star. Nothing groundbreaking, but it was still an enjoyable, sweet, cute little good time. Next, I read another non-horror related book. This is a romance book, and it's a nostalgia-themed romance book, so it perfectly fit with the vibe and tone I was going for in April. The First Date Prophecy by Kate and Danny Tamborelli. I loved this book. It was so funny. It was perfect balance between romance and comedy. It was a great balanced rom-com. Just such a good time. Essentially, this couple, they meet, and their first date ends up being at this restaurant where there is a fortune teller, and the fortune teller's like, you guys should be together, but then disaster strikes during the first date, and they're like, are we cursed? We need to figure out what her fortune meant for us. Like, are we meant to be together, or was the disaster that happened after her reading for them significant and telling of how their relationship would go? This is written by real-life husband and wife, Kate and Danny Tamborelli, and if Danny's name sounds familiar to you, it's because he played Little Pete on The Adventures of Pete and Pete. Yes. And by the way, I freaking love this book. I ended up giving this a 5-star because I had such a great time. They just released a new book and I cannot wait to read it, but I'm probably going to save it for April of next year, but it sucks to wait. But because of the vibes, I know it's going to fit perfectly in with next April, so just like this one fit in with this April. By the way, I'm not going to go in depth on these book synopses because I did vlog every single week of the month of April, so I have in-depth thoughts on almost all of these books, if not every single one, in those vlogs. So I will link every single vlog down below. If you're looking for more information or more of my feelings about these books, check out those vlogs. Next up, I read a book from Kindle Unlimited, and that was Bad Movie Night by Patrick Lacey. This book was on my 24 books to read in 2024. So enjoyable, so weird. I loved it. It fit a prompt. We had one of these prompts that said, read a book featuring old technology on the cover or in the story. This definitely featured old technology in the story. It's about this VHS tape. After this guy watches it, he starts to feel a little weird. He has a feeling that there's something more to the tape. It's not just an old, forgotten about movie, and so he goes about investigating what the tape is and why it fell into his hands and what it all means, and I just loved it. I thought it was really well written. It wasn't even a very long book, but I thoroughly had a great time. 4.5-star rating from me. Next, another 4.5-star rated book for me, Joey Leonard's Last Horror Movie Marathon. This is about a rental store closing, and Joey is the manager at said rental store, and he's really sad that it's closing. And he is left, basically willed, some horror movies from the rental store by his late boss who passed away. And he's lamenting over the closing of the store, watching some movies in his basement, and he puts in a random tape that he discovers in the box of movies that he was given. This tape is not labeled like the others are. It's not like official looking, and weird things start to happen. In fact, he passes out and can't remember what happens after he passes out while watching the movie. More ensues from there, but I loved this. I loved the references to horror movies. I loved the rental store aspect of it. Really well done. Super crazy ending. I just had a ball. There was references to one of my favorite horror movies in here, which is Phantasm 2, so I think that made me apt to like it even more and probably was one of the factors of why I rated it so highly, but it definitely delivered for me. And it totally had nostalgic vibes, but also a very intriguing and interesting story at the same time, too. Next, I dug into another random middle grade book that I just had on my book cart. I picked out a few things before the month started from my shelves and put them on my book cart, things that were just, you know, old school vintage books. And this is a vintage Goosebumps knockoff book. This is a Shivers book. It is Ghost Rider. I believe, is this number 1? Oh no, it's number 3 in the series. And it was not anything to write home about. I would say it was one of the not very impressive Goosebump knockoff books that I've read in the recent past. I ended up giving it a 3.5 stars. it was still entertaining, but, just not my favorite Goosebumps knockoff book. Next up, I read The Cursed Among Us. I don't have a physical copy of this, but it was a really quick read. I listened to this on audio, and this is a spooky-themed coming-of-age book. I believe this is actually a YA book, if I recall. A group of kids, they are making their own movie in the forest, and they come across something that changes one of them, and then things start to go to hell in the little small town. That's all I want to say about it from there. The group of kids have to come together and try to essentially defeat whatever this thing is that they disturbed in the forest, and it seems to be something evil. So can they defeat it is the question. I ended up giving this, I believe, a 4-star rating. Not my favorite coming-of-age book, but if you're looking for coming-of-age plus spooky, I think this one would have you covered. And I think most people would have a mostly enjoyable time with this. I could see people rating it anywhere from a 3 to a 4.5, depending on, each person's taste. Next up, yet another random middle grade Goosebumps knockoff book that I read in April. This is Welcome to the Merry-Go-Round, and it is from the Dead Time Stories series. This is number 12 in the series. Look at this fantastic cover. I almost didn't say cover correctly, but this is a great cover. I didn't love this one very much either, but still overall had a fun time reading it. I'm looking at my journal, so I'm trying to remember, did I give it a 3 or a 3.5? I ended up giving it a 3.5. There was a merry-go-round in the story, and there was a carnival in the story, and also time travel may or may not be involved. Just a cute little story, nothing to write home about, but still glad I read it, because sometimes these are just fun little quick reads and good little palate cleansers between other adult-themed reads. Next up, one of my favorite reads of the month, Dead 11 by Jimmy Giuliano, and I ended up giving this a 5-star. I loved it. I would actually classify this as more of a mystery with thriller elements versus a pure horror book. It did have some horror elements as well, and in addition to thriller elements, but honestly, more mystery, more thriller than anything super horror heavy. So if you're not a horror reader, I think you could survive reading this, because I really enjoyed the story. I even wrote on a little post-it note on the first page that it has a great first page. Some people thought this book dragged. I did not. I was thoroughly engaged. I really liked the characters, and I really liked how the mystery tied together at the end. Super enjoyable read all around. Next up, Sabbath of the Fox Devils. I had never heard anyone else talk about this book. I randomly found it, I think, on Storygraph when I was browsing similar books to books I have liked in the past, and this one popped up. This one has strong nostalgia vibes, and it's pitched as a splatterpunk ode to Goosebumps, as well as an homage to creature feature movies of the 80s like Critters and movies of that nature. I definitely saw that inspiration in this book. However, this book was really deeper than I thought. I thought it was just going to be kind of a quick, crazy, wild time. It was wild, but it definitely had some emotion on top of those elements, and it also had a lot of religious horror, which I wasn't expecting. Let me just read you the premise so I don't give away anything.
After learning about the existence of a powerful grimoire through a cartoon, 12-year-old Joe is determined to find it and change his lot in life, but in doing so, he'll also uncover a local priest's dark secret and how it may be connected to Joe's brother abruptly leaving town 5 years ago.
And there's more that takes place, but again, like the priest and the parents of Joe, they're all very religious, and it's a big part of the story. So there's definitely some religious elements, so be aware if you don't like that in your horror, but I love that, and I thought it worked really well in this story. This was a hit for me, 4.5 stars, and I think more people should check it out if any of what I said sounds good to you. Next up, I read another YA book, and it had some spooky elements, but I would say this is more of a character-driven book than a horror driven book. Like, there's not a ton of scary things in this book, but if you love coming of age and you love characters, I think you could have a good time with this. It also has nostalgic elements because part of the story revolves around this arcade slash pinball machine, so what's more nostalgic than that? It is Dead Flip. The cover's fantastic. I had a great time. I just really really enjoyed getting to know the characters. This was a solid read for me. I ended up giving it a 4.5 star rating, and if I had to compare Dead Flip with the other YA spooky coming of age book I read, The Cursed Among Us, I think I enjoyed Dead Flip just a little bit more because I liked the characters more and I liked the overall story a little bit more. But when it comes to more horror elements, The Cursed Among Us had more horror heavy elements, just in case you guys were thinking about reading both or either of those and wanted to know more and wanted to know some comparisons between the two. Those are my thoughts on the comparisons and the similarities between the two. Next, I did dig into an official Goosebumps book. I didn't just read Goosebumps knockoffs for the entire month of April. I did dig into this Goosebumps, The Beast from the East. This was my co-host April's flippin' host rec. You could find April on Instagram at Apple and Alchemy. Please check her out. In fact, please check out all of my co-hosts. They are all linked below and they are all fantastic. By the way, Dead 11 was Katrina's host pick over at Katrina Brown. And I'm hoping I'm not forgetting any other host picks so far. But yes, this one was April's, and it was not my favorite Goosebumps book, to be honest with you. It was fun, but in my opinion, not the best. I thought it was a little slow at times. I didn't really love the horror elements. These kids are trekking through the forest with their parents, and they get separated. And they come across these beasts who are in the middle of playing a game, and they try to rope the kids into playing the game with them. And then more ensues from there. I ended up giving this about a 3-star rating. Next, I was able to get to a Christopher Pike book, Road to Nowhere. I had a really great time with this. Essentially, this girl, she's running away from home, she picks up some hitchhikers, and they tell stories back and forth. There are some emotional stories that they're telling, and also she ends up revealing some about her life to the hitchhikers and why she's running away. It's more of a slow burn of sorts, but I really enjoyed the ending. I had a good time with this. I know not everyone who's read this book has liked it, but I liked this a lot better than the last 2 other Christopher Pike books that I have read, so this one was a hit for me for solid stars. You know, not my very favorite Christopher Pike, which would be Monster, but definitely far from being my least favorite Christopher Pike book. Next, I read Skin by Kathy Koja, and this was the book club pick for my co-host Amy over from Amy Noel Reads. She runs a book club called the Dark Hearts Book Club, so that's why I picked this book up for the month of April, and it fit in perfectly because it is a older horror book, and I personally loved it. I know Amy DNF'd it, and some other people just did not like it or jive with it, but myself and my friend Katrina, again, from the channel Katrina Brown, we both loved it, both gave it 5 stars. Now, Katrina said she liked it a little bit less than The Cipher by Kathy Koja. We both read that, I think, when was that, last year? And I liked it a little bit more than The Cipher, so Katrina and I, you know, we differed a little bit in how much we liked it compared to flippin' The Cipher, but we agreed on the rating and we both really overall loved it. I think this is a very hard to discuss book because it's about these 2 artists and their journey towards self-discovery and their journey towards making meaningful art. And it's written in such a way that it's kind of hard to absorb. Choppy sentences. I found that listening to the audiobook really helped, though, because it started to take on like a sing-song type of nature with the choppy element, the way it's written. And the book, a large part of the book is these 2 artists coming together with other artists and making these really intense, really dangerous, body-altering performances. And it's almost like the book became a performance in itself, the way it was narrated in the audiobook. So it mirrored what I was reading about in the book and what was happening in the book, at least for me. I loved it. I especially loved the ending, and in my journal I wrote, so gritty, unusual writing style, felt like the performances described in the story, like the style felt like the performances. It was about love, life, and the search for meaning, and yeah, I really loved it. It was gnarly, it was gruesome in ways because of the body horror elements, but yeah, really entertaining, at least for me, but I know it wouldn't work for everyone. P.S. There is like weird, I don't know, techno-sounding music coming from, I guess, the park next door. I don't know what's happening. If you can hear it, I am so sorry. It is really bugging me, and I don't know what to do, but I'm just gonna, you know, forge ahead, I guess. Next up, The Mall by Richie Tankersley Kuzik. I was actually able to find a audiobook for this on YouTube, so just somebody recorded their own audiobook version of this. It was really well done with great voices, but the story itself, I didn't really like how it wrapped up. I was a little confused by some of the character developments in this book and some of the reveals. So not my favorite YA old school point horror type of book. Ended up giving this a 3.5 star. Lots of deaths happening at a mall, but it was very thematic because, you got a mall. What's more 80s or 90s themed than a mall? So in that way, it really did fit for my April theme and for my old school April nostalgia-a-thon. So I'm so glad I read it. Next up, I read another middle grade book. This is an Are You Afraid of the Dark book, and it is The Tale of the Terrifying Hockey Team. I really enjoyed this, but I think it's because I like hockey a lot. So this hockey team, they like to play around on a local pond, a frozen pond, of course, near their school, and just for fun, even though they are part of an actual team, but it's, the team's not in session, the sport isn't in session, so they just play for fun. And this mysterious group appear and they challenge the other group of kids, and this other team that appears, they're kind of sinister and a little shady and also smelly. So what's with this other group of people? What's with this team of kids? Why are they so mean and disheveled, and what is going on with them? You'd have to read it to find out, but again, I think I liked it more than most people would because I like hockey. I ended up giving this a 4-star rating. It was very enjoyable for me. Alright, next up, I read a YA book called Rewind. This was cute, but again, not my favorite read of the month. It was solid though. It had nostalgia vibes. This girl ends up accidentally going back in time, and she ends up meeting her father, but her father back when he's essentially her same age. And she tries to figure out, what do I need to do to get back to my time? Do I have to change, the course of my dad's life in some way? Do I have to affect the past somehow to get back to the present, etc., etc.? But there is nostalgia vibes that I did like. It was a quick, easy listen, and so overall enjoyable, just not like anything mind-blowing, let's say. Next, something different. I actually checked out a nonfiction book, and it is the nonfiction book that the movie Goodfellas was based off of, and I loved it. It had a little foreword by Martin Scorsese where he talked about, working with the author on the script for Goodfellas, which I had no idea that the author of this book, Wise Guy, was actually involved in writing the script for Goodfellas. The script for the movie and this nonfiction book are very, very similar. The movie Goodfellas is very faithful to this real-life story about Henry, and Henry is our main character, our main guy that we're following in Wise Guy. Loved it, loved it, loved it. If you like Goodfellas, you might as well take a listen to Wise Guy, but make sure you find the non-abridged version because there is a shorter abridged version that is available on audio, but if you're trying to listen to it, I would go for the full-length version. I had such a great time, but I love Goodfellas. It's one of my favorite movies of all time, so for me, it was great to kind of listen to it in another different way and get a little bit more detail on things in Henry's life. Next up, I read the first book in the Barracudas series and the second book in the series, and I love them both 5 stars, knocked my socks off. Freaking not only 2 of my favorite reads of the month, but also the Barracudas series in its entirety, because I have read the whole series since April and beyond. It's my favorite series, maybe of all time when it comes to a middle grade series. So cute, so wonderful. Banicula was one of the host recs for Amy over at Amy Noah Reads. Thank you so much, Amy, for making this your host rec. Basically giving me that push to check it out. I loved it. I can't imagine not having read it. It is so cute, and I think I would love to reread the series as a whole one day in the future because it's just so enjoyable. I could see this being a comfort read for me for a long time to come. So adorable. So adorable. If you don't know what it's about, don't even look anything up. Just go and listen to it or read it. I highly recommend the audio because it's super cute, but either way, whether you do the audio, the book, or a mixture, I think you can't go wrong. The whole series, it's just fantastic, honestly. Alright, and the last book that I read for April was my book club book. So my book club is the Midnight Book Society. It is open to everybody. There is a free and public Discord, which is linked below. I'm not going to have a live show for this, I don't think. I've already talked to Crystal and Amy, and they're okay with not having a live show. I was supposed to, but just really ran out of time. And then May, I was involved in another readathon right after Old School April was over, so just kind of burnt out and didn't really have time to make room for a live show. However, I am so glad I read this. It started off like a great read. I thought it was going to be a 5 or a 4.5 star. It dragged during the second half a little bit, but the way it came together still was very solid for me. Ended up really enjoying it. The ending brought everything together, and I essentially decided to end up giving this a 4-star rating. Solid. Really happy I read it finally, because The Neverending Story, the movie, is one of my favorite movies of all time, and I do like the movie better, but this gave a little extra insight. It was interesting to see the differences between the book and the movie, and yeah, I'm gonna have to check out Neverending Story too, because apparently the second half of this book follows some things that happen in the movie, and I didn't know that, so I'll have to check that out. But I really enjoyed this book, and again, not perfect by any means, because of that second half being so slow, and some elements I just didn't like of that second half, but again, when it's all said and done, it really came together, and I'm super pleased that I made this a book club pick, because otherwise I think it would have taken me a really long time if I had not had the nudge of it being my book club pick. So yes, very happy with this choice, because now I can say that I've read it, and it brings a little extra context to the movie when I go back to watch it for later viewings. Okay guys, now let's take a look at my monthly stats. I read 22 books in April. I read over 4,900 pages. It's officially 4,973. I listened to over 2,000 minutes approximately of audio. I had an average rating of 4.2 stars, which is very, very high. I checked out 5 books from the library. I can tell you for sure that they were all digital books from the library, nothing physical. I started 2 series, and I classified one of my reads as a diverse read. I listened to 7 plus 6 using audio, so that's 13 books using audio, and I read 8 books physically, which is not bad, considering, for earlier months, I did not read a lot of physical books. 8 physical books, even though a lot of them were middle grade, is still really, really good for me, because I have not been a big physical reader as of late. I've been more of an audiobook person, or a mixture type of person where I listen to the audio as I read along. But yeah, 8 physical books ain't too shabby, at least, I think. And yeah, I read 13 novellas, and I'm counting all the middle grade as novellas, 9 full-length novels. I read 8 adult books, 2 children's books, 8 middle grade books, 4 YA books, a very good mix there, if you ask me. I had 2 3 stars, 4 3.5 stars. I had 6 4-star rated books. I had 4 4.5 star books, and 6 5-star books. 6 5-star books! That is incredible. Of course, 2 of those are Bunnicula, and I love Bunnicula, but yeah, that's why it's so high. Also, I think my genres were pretty diverse. I had 1 fantasy book, 15 horror books. I had 2 books I classified as other. I had 1 romance, 1 sci-fi-ish book, and 1 true crime book. That was, of course, Wise Guy, the Goodfellas themed book. 21 fiction books and only 1 nonfiction. Of course, again, that's Wise Guy. But overall, I think it was a super well-rounded month, and I'm very, very happy with my progress. And also, my progress for the reading years were pretty all over the place and pretty diverse too. I read a lot of newer released books, but also a lot of old school vintage books, so a nice mix. And yeah, I loved it. Guys, if you participated in Old School April, thank you so much. Congrats to the Silver Snakes who won. We have picked out our theme for 2025. It is a secret though. We are keeping it secret until we get closer to next April, so stay tuned. The winning team, the Silver Snakes, did nominate quite a few themes, and we had them vote on what their favorites were, and we had a winner. And I'm so excited. I can't wait to reveal it. It's so freaking difficult to keep it to myself. I can't even tell you. I'm dying to let you know, but I am... my lips are sealed. I'm keeping it to myself. You're not going to get it out of me. You're not going to pry it out of me. You're not going to convince me. Alright guys, for this time, that is it for me. If you want to hear about the movies and TV shows I watched in April, I watched 17 movies and quite a few TV show episodes and cartoon episodes as well. I'm going to do a special Patreon only wrap up for that, so if you want to hear about that, it'll be available on my Patreon. I have different levels. It'll definitely be available for the middle and top tier. So yeah, it's not filmed yet, but that's what I plan on doing, so check that out if you're interested. And we're currently doing a Patreon only readathon right now, so if you like readathons, you might as well join and hang out with us. We're having a great time. Another special thanks to all of my co-hosts. I will link them down below. They are fantastic people, and I would not have had as fun of a month as I had without them, their support, their help, but also their fun shenanigans that they brought to the table, because it was so much fun to hang out with everybody. Also, a big thanks to all of you, like I said before. So honored that you all participated. To anyone out there who's watching who did participate, thank you. It means the world to me. This readathon is my baby. It is, like, you know, one of the things I'm most proud about in life. I just have such a fun time every year doing this event. Let me know if you guys read any of the books I read. If so, what did you think of them? Also, let me know what your favorite read of April was. I'd love to know. Leave any of that, or all of that, or a VHS tape if you don't feel like commenting anything, down in the comments below. But like I said, for this time, that is it for me. Till next time, guys, you know what you can do. Keep on killing it. Bye, guys.